I'm Nima Rajan. Procurement Minister Anita Anand says more than 80% of eligible Canadians have received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine, and 64% have received 2 doses. She and Health Minister Patty Hajdu marked the milestone of receiving enough vaccines for all Canadians. Prince Edward Island has become the 3rd province behind Nova Scotia and BC to sign on to the federal government's National Child Care Program. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the announcement yesterday in Charlottetown.
Today, I can announce that we have signed an agreement with the government of PEI to provide parents on the island with $10 a day childcare for kids under 6. And we're going to get there, Premier King tells me, within 3 years.
He says the agreement will cut average childcare fees in PEI in half by the end of next year and create more than 450 new spots within 2 years. Well, meanwhile, Canada's Labour Minister was given a briefing note back in March that it would cost employers at least $1.1 million a year to provide free feminine hygiene products in federally regulated workplaces. The note to Philomena Tassi estimated the annual employer cost to provide free menstrual products could also top $2.3 million with a 100% take-up rate. Minister Tassi says officials plan to speak with labor and employer groups over the summer and fall. The federal government says New Brunswick is failing to live up to its obligations under the Canada Health Act by making it difficult for women to access abortions. Because of that, Ottawa is holding back healthcare funds, initially reported to be in the millions of dollars. But a spokesperson from the Prime Minister's office says the correct figure is just over $140,000. The union representing 9,000 Canadian Border Service Agency employees is calling on Treasury Board President Jean-Yves Duclos, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair, and CBSA President John Osowski to return to the bargaining table. Those workers have voted in favor of walking off the job next month to back their contract demands. The union says the two sides haven't been able to agree on issues around safety and workplace culture. About 2,200 unionized workers employed by de Havilland and Bombardier at the Downsview facility in North Toronto have gone on strike. Unifor says the workers walked off the job as threatened this morning. This comes 2 days after talks resumed with the two companies following a 3-week cooling-off period. National President Jerry Dias says the union will remain at the bargaining table with both companies while the job action is ongoing. The average cost of a data breach in Canada hit a record high during the COVID-19 pandemic. A new report from IBM Securities says data breaches cost Canadian organizations $6.75 million on average per incident in the 2021 survey year. That's the highest since IBM first included Canada in its survey 7 years ago. The report indicates data breaches cost $1 million more on average when remote work was indicated as a factor in the event. An expert at Dalhousie University says the ongoing drought in Saskatchewan is going to have a big impact on food affordability at both grocery stores and restaurants. Sylvain Charbois, director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab, says as soon as some farmers are affected, entire supply lines and inventories are affected as well. Ontario is ramping up efforts to get students fully vaccinated by September. Youth aged 12 to 17 have the lowest overall vaccination rate of any eligible age cohort in Ontario. Just over 64% have 1 dose, while 41% are fully vaccinated. UFT professor Barry Pakes says people are just not in that mindset of getting vaccinated since they're busy with their summer activities. To be double vaccinated by the start of the school year, students would need to get their first dose by Monday. Green leader Annamie Paul says the party will hold a national convention next month, even if a federal election campaign is in full swing. Ms. Paul says party executives have opted to proceed with the AGM on August 21st. A national convention is expected to take time and resources as Ms. Paul tries to ramp up volunteer recruitment, fundraising, and election readiness. Nova Scotia's 3 main party leaders will hold their first face-to-face debate of the election campaign tonight. Liberal leader Ian Rankin, Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston, and NDP leader Gary Burrill will square off in a 90-minute debate to be broadcast on CBC. Nova Scotians will go to the polls on August 17th. Well, 5 years after becoming Canada's youngest Olympic champion, Penny Oleksiak is the country's most decorated summer Olympian. The 21-year-old from Toronto earned a bronze medal in the women's 200-meter freestyle for her 6th career medal. All right, stay with us as we take a look at the pros and cons of using investment apps compared to being helped by an investment advisor. We'll have an interview with Mr. Thomas Caldwell, the chairman and director of Caldwell Securities, coming up next. Then, of course, more news from around the world. Stay tuned, everyone. In an online world of apps and quick digital fixes, can Canadian investors trust phone apps with their hard-earned money? Some may prefer the convenience of an investment app, but those who are looking for true growth in their portfolios may want a professional's insight. Well, joining us now to tell us more about the pros and cons of investing through apps or advisors is Mr. Thomas Caldwell, chairman and director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily. Always great having you on the show.
Thank you, Nima.
Now, investors have been focusing on apps lately to help them navigate their lives, especially when it comes to trading apps. So what are your thoughts on this evolving world of investing?
Well, there's so many applications out there, but first thing is there is no magic box for investment success. Otherwise, we get rid of a lot of people and just have boxes sitting around here. Yes, you can operate at speed. Speed is not that critical, really. In fact, for me, usually when I rush to do something, I'm making a mistake. I think speed of execution, transaction costs are not the critical determinants of investment success. Transaction cost is really not a relevant thing unless you're a high-speed professional trader, and most people are not that.
And how does investment through an app compare to using an investment advisor, especially in the long run?
Well, I could look at it. I do both. I can trade on my screens and do whatever I want, but that's not the real component of making money. The real component of making money is ideas, and good ideas, refining ideas. And with all due respect, they don't necessarily come from the media. They come from bouncing ideas back and forth with other professionals and refining ideas. So I think from that perspective, it really does make sense, for me at any rate, to have a collegial approach to generating ideas and refining those ideas. Executing them is kind of the final step when you've worked out the first point.
Now, you often talk about quelling your emotions when it comes to investing. So can you tell us a little bit more about this? What does this mean, and what do emotions have to do when it comes to investing?
Everything. If I look at the number one factor, and this is for retail, I have no emotions. I've been at this so long, I'm like an offshore shark, just cruising around looking for opportunities, and I can be up and down tons of money in a given day. I'm used to that sort of thing. But most people, retail investors, may lose money on the basis of their emotions. Either they get frustrated or they get panic stricken out. For example, during the March collapse, during the initial COVID impact, oh my God, get out of the market, the world is ending. Whereas me and people like me just cruising around are looking for opportunities. And every time I see a real downdraft in the market, I just go through the ashes and look for the opportunities. So that means emotions. The best way to quell emotions, and I'm not saying I'm totally devoid of them, I'm not, but the best way to quell emotions is, for me, I talk to my partners, our traders, my associates, and I think that's very important. The talking to someone else helps you to quell. Listen, when you have a personal problem, sometimes talking to someone else helps you to work through it, and that's certainly the case with investments. I've seen more money lost from emotions than any other factor, and the best way to quell your emotions, talk to somebody.
So as you're saying, you're a firm believer when it comes to teamwork and bouncing ideas off of each other. Why is that important when it comes to helping clients with investments?
Well, there's two consultative processes. First off, there's our internal consultative process, whether it be reviewing research reports, discussing. And research reports don't generate much, that's background. But really bouncing ideas, because ideas travel verbally, really. And then it's the internal refining of the idea, and then also discussing it with the client. I mean, I had a discussion with a retail client the other day who wanted to invest some money, but he hadn't thought through it, that he may need the money in 6 months. And I said, I can't handle short-term volatility if I'm dealing with a 6-month horizon on a portfolio. Better off just to buy a note of some kind. So part of that is that he could make a big error because the market could go down 10% tomorrow morning. And I can handle short-term volatility like that if I have a year or 2 years to work on a portfolio. But a matter of months, I can't do it, and it's too risky for the client. But clients don't think of this. So I think that consultative, discuss it with someone, refining your ideas. And very often when I do that, I hear myself talking. And sometimes I don't even buy into my own ideas, but I need that process of just bouncing it back and forth.
All right, sir, just about 30 seconds left, but what would be your advice for first-time investors that are contemplating either using an app or investing with the help of a professional?
Well, I really do think people tend to stay away from our business because they say, "Oh, I don't have enough money to do it," or "I don't, I don't want someone selling me a product, etc." A truly professional investment advisor is that an advisor, and you got to find some. I think it makes sense to phone a firm, an IROC firm. Obviously, I'm biased, Caldwell Securities or whatever, but to call someone and talk to an advisor.
We'll be right back, everyone. As COVID-19 pandemic precautions drop off, medical experts are worried about a resurgence of RSV, a respiratory disease that is known to particularly affect children younger than 2 years old. RSV, also known as respiratory syncytial virus, is an infection that appears to be rising in Australia and more recently in the United States. The Canadian Medical Association Journal said in a commentary this week that RSV could see a resurgence in Canada as well if new precautions are not taken. The article also claims the RSV season in Canada is usually late fall to early spring. The authors say a proactive approach is needed in Canada. Well, to talk more on this in our weekly Tia Health medical segment is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Doctor, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Great to be here.
So let's start with an overview of what exactly RSV is and its symptoms.
Right. So RSV causes acute respiratory tract illnesses in patients really of all ages. Almost all children are affected by RSV by 2 years of age, and we almost often see reinfections as well. It's the most common cause of lower respiratory tract infection in kids, especially less than 1 year of age. And for most people, it's mild symptoms, cold-like symptoms, runny nose, mild cough, but it can also cause severe respiratory disease like bronchiolitis, bronchospasms, pneumonias, and even acute respiratory failure.
Now, researchers in this article claim that this virus especially affects children who are younger than 2 years old. So why this particular demographic, Dr. Raut?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the big groups that are at risk are basically premature infants, very young infants, less than 6 months or younger, or children younger than 2 years old with chronic lung disease or congenital heart disease. We think it's because that the infection is so common that as you get older, you've been exposed to it multiple times. So there's this immunity to it, whereas with very young kids, they don't have that exposure.
All right, Dr. Raut. Now, we've seen pandemic restrictions starting to loosen across Canada. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the pandemic impacted the number of RSV patients in Canada?
All right, it's a great question. So RSV really spreads through droplets containing the virus. So when someone coughs or sneezes, for instance, they can also live a few hours on surfaces like countertops, doorknobs, and toys, and really easy to spread from hand-to-hand contact there. Obviously, there's some similarity here with the coronavirus in this transmission. So RSV ended up dropping very sharply in the pandemic as social distancing measures all but stopped the spread. So for Canada, for instance, only 239 tests for RSV were positive between August 2020 and May 2021, compared to what we would usually expect, which is 18,660 positive cases in 2019.
Wow, that's a significant jump, Doctor. So now we're stepping out of the pandemic. So we are seeing concern around a resurgence of this virus while immunity to it is low. So should Canadians and Canadian parents be concerned?
I think so. I think we do expect that the cases will increase dramatically, and I do expect that the majority of Canadians may experience very mild symptoms. However, I think we're still very much at risk, especially for our young children, and we need special precautions for them.
So what kind of steps can parents take to protect their infants from RSV, Doctor?
The simplest thing to do is continue all the preventative habits we've developed over the past year. Hand washing as much as possible, mask wearing, and also if you have a child at higher risk, consider social distancing to continue as well.
And going back to this commentary here, the doctors in this article are saying that a proactive approach is needed by officials. So, Doctor, what kind of steps should our leaders take before RSV season? We've got about a minute and a half left, Doctor.
Sure. So, what we're seeing is as the pandemic-related physical distancing measures are relaxed, we should really focus on healthcare providers continuing to provide emphasis on hygiene, such as washing hands. We support really the ongoing efforts to keep vulnerable infants from coming into contact with other people with respiratory illness. And other protective measures that we don't talk too much about is breastfeeding, which is quite helpful, and avoiding secondhand smoke exposure. Second, I think we should continue with the confirmatory RSV testing following usual indications to provide surveillance data. And then finally, I think pediatric ICUs should anticipate an increase in severe RSV cases. We've seen this in Australia already. So the RSV program should be prepared to even consider immunoprophylaxis off-season to the highest risk infants in case those levels get to those.
All right, Dr. Abhishek Raut from Apple Tree Medical Group. Always great having you on our weekly medical segment. We'll see you next time, sir.
Thanks so much for having me.
Stay tuned. We've got more top stories from around the world coming up next in our international segment. So stay with us. We'll have more news after some of these short messages from our sponsors. We'll be right back on the Forum Daily, everyone. Stay tuned. Tokyo has the dubious distinction of setting a record it was hoping to avoid, especially while hosting the Summer Olympics. On Wednesday, the Japanese capital reported an all-time high for new COVID-19 infections, with 3,177. That's about 300 more daily cases than yesterday's count, and comes as Tokyo remains under a fourth state of emergency. Experts blame the surge on the more contagious Delta variant. 3 American-based tech companies have reported combined profits of more than $50 billion in the April to June quarter. The massive profits pouring into Apple, Microsoft, and Google owner Alphabet show why they have a combined market value of $6.4 trillion, which is more than double their collective value when the pandemic started 16 months ago. While iPhone sales postings are double-digit growth over the last year, Apple's profit nearly doubled to $21.7 billion. Powered by Google, Alphabet's profit nearly tripled to $18.5 billion, while Microsoft's profit shot up 47% to $16.5 billion. 4 U.S. Capitol Hill police officers testified to their experiences in responding to the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Their testimony came on the first day of the Democratic-led House Select Committee investigating the attack on the seat of the United States government. The 4 officers described being physically and verbally attacked by a mob of then-President Donald Trump supporters. Partisan tensions have tightened over the riot, with many Republicans downplaying or denying the incident. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is seeking to bolster ties with Vietnam during a 2-day visit. In a speech in Singapore, his first stop, Defense Secretary Austin said he was committed to pursuing a constructive and stable relationship with China. But he repeated that Beijing's claim to the South China Sea has no basis in international law and treads on the sovereignty of other countries. Vietnam and the Philippines are among China's fiercest opponents in the territorial disputes. Armenia's defense ministry is reporting that 3 of its troops were killed and 2 more were wounded in clashes with Azerbaijani forces on the border between the 2 ex-Soviet nations. The 2 countries have been locked in a decades-long tug-of-war over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. They accused each other of starting the clashes on Wednesday morning. Azerbaijan's defense ministry says 2 of its servicemen were wounded in Wednesday's confrontation. Dozens of former military commanders are calling on the UK government to relocate more of the Afghans who worked with British troops over the last 20 years. They argued in a letter published Wednesday that Afghan interpreters and other support staff are likely to be murdered by the Taliban as foreign forces pull out. Retired General Richard Dannatt and other senior leaders of the campaign in Afghanistan are urging the government to expand its relocation program to include interpreters and other support staff who were dismissed for minor infractions. Iran's supreme leader has called the U.S. stubborn in stalled nuclear talks in Vienna for discussing Tehran's missiles and regional influence. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's remarks today come as his hardline protege, President-elect Ebrahim Raisi, is supposed to be sworn in next week as the head of the country's civilian government. While Mr. Raisi has said he wants to return to the accord, which saw Iran limit its enrichment of uranium in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions, Mr. Khamenei called for a more adversarial approach in his remarks. A German woman who traveled to Syria to join the Islamic State group and whose husband bought a Yazidi woman as a slave has been charged with membership in a terror group and being an accessory to a crime against humanity. The indictment was announced by federal prosecutors on Wednesday. It is the latest in a string of cases in Germany involving women who went to the area held by IS and were involved in holding women captured by the extremist group as slaves. A court in Belarus has declared a Polish-funded TV channel that covered last year's anti-government protests in the country to be extremist. It was the latest move in a crackdown on independent media and civil society. Authorities say they blocked the Belsat website and all social media accounts in Belarus. While the ruling was based on an Interior Ministry inquiry, it was not clear what content was deemed to be extremist. There have been more than 200 raids of offices and apartments of activists and journalists so far this month. A Montreal-based food cooperative is actively preventing farm food waste by harvesting unwanted produce and redistributing it to people in areas with limited access to fresh food. La Place Commune's community development agent, Ava Frank, says she hopes that other cities will follow their lead and start their own sustainable food initiatives. According to a Government of Canada report, 13% of fruits and vegetables in Canada went to waste in 2019. And in Quebec, this number can be as high as 20%. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, or follow us on social media. We're available on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time. Take care, Canada.